Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today I'm going to help get you guys ready for the release of The Strength of the Few, which comes out in just a few days here on November 11th. Get you guys ready for it by doing a brief recap for Book 1, The Will of the Many. This is definitely not intended to be like a super detailed summary or recap of every single thing that happens in The Will of the Many. It's more so to be a refresher for you, just to kind of jog your memory, especially if you didn't have a chance to go back and reread Book 1 before the sequel comes out. So I am going to break the video down into 4 main points. We're going to talk about the world, we're going to talk about the will, the overall story, and then of course get into that just really unhinged ending that I'm still thinking about. But I will say, if you don't have time to reread the entire book, but you still want a little bit more after this video, I highly recommend at least going back to the last 100 pages of Book 1, specifically starting with chapter 62. And I think that will set you up perfectly for The Strength of the Few. But yeah, let me know down in the comments any questions you guys have, anything you want me to clarify or expand on about the world or the characters, the story, all of that. So I want to chat about it with you down below. And I just want to help get you guys excited and hyped up for this sequel, because I do think it is a really strong sequel that fans of Book 1 are really gonna love. And I think this goes without saying, but if you guys have still not read The Will of the Many, do not watch this video. Even though the recap is gonna be broad, I am still gonna be touching on some major spoilers, and I would love for you guys to just experience the book for yourself for the first time. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let's get into it. So I think the best place to start is the world of The Will of the Many. In this, we have the Catalan Republic, and by the time we as the reader even come into the story, the Republic has conquered so many different kingdoms and nations, and so now everybody is governed by Catalan laws and also their will-based hierarchy system that they have. So the major world-building influences in The Will of the Many are inspired by ancient Rome. We see this a lot in the settings around the world and their architecture, but more importantly, we see this in how the characters are ranked in the society. There are 3 main branches in the hierarchy, or what they call the senatorial pyramids, and those pyramids are governance, religion, and military. As we learned from the first book, only the strongest and most skilled people in the hierarchy are recruited for those particular senatorial pyramids. And we also start learning about this event called the Cataclysm. Specifically, this tells us in the first book, quote, "No one knows what caused the cataclysm, the world-spanning disaster 3 centuries ago that left less than 5 people in every 100 alive. Most of the survivors were mere children. Records to emerge out of the chaotic decades that followed were few, and the ones that did recall towns filled with the dead, cities burning, whole nations erased in a moment." So what we do know of the pre-cataclysm is shrouded in a lot of mystery, but we do know that it left behind like ruins, technology that the Catalan Republic uses today, and also it has to do a lot with will and the way that will powers the hierarchy in their society as a whole. So now let's actually get into the will. I think if you like the term magic system, you can think of the will as the magic system for the hierarchy series. This is not only where a lot of like the magic elements of the book are coming in, but will is the foundation of the hierarchy of the Catalan Republic. This is how they power their society, how they maintain it. So everyone that's part of the hierarchy has a rank, and that rank dictates who you're ceding your will to. And if you're higher ranked, it dictates how many people you're taking will from in your particular pyramid. At the bottom, like I mentioned, we have the Octavii, and they cede half their will to the Septimi above them. The Septimi take the will of the Octavii along with their own and cede it to the sexti above them, and so on and so forth. And when we're talking about will, it's basically what makes you you. This describes will as all of your drive, your focus, your mental and physical energy. And it's really important to note that this is not actually ceding his will to anybody. We'll get into that a little bit more in the story part, but he is not officially part of the hierarchy because he refuses to cede his will to someone more powerful than him. In the Republic, they also have these devices known as the Aurora Columni. That device enables characters to cede their will to other characters, but once you undergo the Aurora Columni, you don't have to use it anymore and you can just cede your will freely. There's also these terrible devices in the world called sappers. It's more so used as a form of like torture. You see them in prisons. There's actually like sapper prisons in the world, and sometimes when characters are punished, they are strapped to these devices and their will is drained of them instantly. And if you touch a sapper and you're not prepared to touch it, you can die, and also everyone that is ceding their will to you can also die. So now let's get into the overall story of the Will of the Many. I mentioned a little towards the beginning that when we come into the story, the Captain Republic, they have already gone around and they've conquered these different places. They've brought them under the rule of the hierarchy. And one of the very last places that the Captain Republic actually conquered was this island nation called Seuss. And our main character, Vis, is from this island nation. When we first meet Vis, we meet him as an orphan, and he's just been trying to do his best to survive. We soon find out that Vis was the Prince of Seuss, and his mother was the queen. He had sisters that were princesses, father was king, and when the Captain Republic came in and invaded his island, his entire family was killed in that invasion, but Vis managed to escape, and he's been living under the identity of Vis, but his real name is actually Diago. So as the story is progressing, we're learning how powerful the Captain Republic is. We learn how they've been imposing their will, no pun intended, on everyone that they've conquered, and also the people in power are extremely powerful and somehow even getting more powerful. But in the background of all of this, though, we have this rebel group called the Anguis, and they have been trying to do everything they can to undermine the hierarchy in a lot of different ways. And the leader of the Anguis is this man that they call Melior. Turns out that he is actually a man named Estevan, and he was actually an advisor to Vis's king father. And another really important character in the Anguis is this woman named Sedocia, and she is doing a lot to try to manipulate Vis in different ways, and basically, use him as the Anguis's puppet to get him to do what they want him to. So yeah, we have Sedocia, and I am going to come back to her, but remember that name for now. So the entire story of the Will of the Many really kicks off when Vis is adopted by this extremely powerful man named Olkiskor Telemus. He is a Magnus Quintus in the senatorial branch of military, and so he approaches Vis at the orphanage. He adopts him, and pretty soon we learn that Olkiskor wants Vis to undergo training so that he can be accepted into the Captain Republic's academy, and it's this really prestigious academy. It sits on this island called Salavagus, and another reason Olkiskor gives Vis for wanting to be at this academy is because religion does oversee the island, and technically the academy is under religion's purview, and military just wants some eyes on what's happening in religion, so he wants Vis on the inside feeding him information. But Olkiskor also has some ulterior motives too, because his brother Searoar was also at the academy, and when he was taking the academy's final exam, he died under extremely mysterious circumstances, and Olkiskor wants Vis to kind of keep an eye on the head of the academy, Viridius, to just see what he's been up to, because things are not adding up. And like Olkiskor has his motivations for wanting to adopt Vis and wanting him at this academy, Vis has his own motivations for even accepting this offer. Being adopted by a Magnus Quintus, of course, is going to offer him a ton of protection, but also, like I mentioned, Vis is not ceding his will to anybody, and his line in the sand is that he is never going to do that. And Olkiskor has basically promised Vis that if he attends the academy and does well enough where he can graduate into one of the higher branches of the hierarchy, he'll never have to cede his will to anybody. So at the Telemus house, we meet another of our major secondary characters, Lenistia. She is not only a friend of Olkiskor's, she was also romantically involved with his brother Searoar. And so Lenistia agrees to train Vis not only in the knowledge of the Republic and all of the really important and powerful families, but also she starts physically training him, getting him up early, keeping him on his toes, and she begins training him also in something that they call the Labyrinth, which is just this really elaborate maze and really dangerous maze that has all these shifting walls, and it's really, really difficult to run. So she starts pretty aggressively getting Vis to train for that. Vis also reads a letter that was sent 2 days before Searoar's death, and part of the letter reads, "Translation right, Obitium lost, Lucium unknown." And at this point in the story, we have absolutely no idea what this means. And so that part of the book where Vis is training and with Lenistia and Olkiskor, that is a big chunk of the first part of the Will of the Many. And finally, we get to the part where Vis is accepted into the academy and he enrolls in that school. Like I mentioned, religion oversees this island, but there's also these like really creepy pre-cataclysm ruins on the island that we'll also get into. But the academy is kind of secluded from a lot of what's going on in the rest of the Katzinen Republic. So Vis arrives at the academy, and it is here that we meet a slew of new characters. Some of the notable ones that Vis interacts with the most, we have Amisa, Calidus, Iden, Equa, Belly, Iroh. I might be missing somebody, but those are kind of the major ones that we get at the academy. And Calidus becomes Vis's best friend, and Iden slowly becomes a close friend of Vis as well. And it's also important to note that the class ranks in the academy kind of mirror what exists in the Republic and in the hierarchy. And so students, depending on their performance in classes, they can be moved up a class, they can be moved down a class. It's really cutthroat and also extremely political too, based on who your family is and all of that. And when you finally reach level 3 at the academy, you're eligible to take the Eudicium, which is the final test there. And again, it's the one that Searohr died under mysterious circumstances while taking. And also, I forgot to mention, it's the one where Lanistia was severely injured while she was taking the exam too. So in this portion of the book, there is so much going on. There's so much just like academy politics and Vis making friends and enemies, moving up classes. So I'm gonna condense a lot of things that are happening in this part and just kind of pull out some of the really big moments and reveals that we get. One of the big things that happens, and some of these might be a little out of order, just go with me here, but one of the big things that happens is Sedocia, who I mentioned, is a member of the Anguis. She is actually undercover, and she is married to Ulquiskor. The hierarchy knows her as Relucia. Quick side note here, call me unobservant if you want to. that reveal caught me so off guard. I think it was just, there were so many other things I was focused on in the story that wasn't even a thought anywhere in my head that she could be Ulquiskor's wife. And there's definitely like nuggets there, because Ulquiskor is always explaining why she's never around and just explaining that she's like really busy and has business elsewhere. At this point in the story, we've already seen Sedocia a few times, and Vis has had like interactions with her, very tense interactions with her. But there's a moment when like there's the Telemas family gathering and Relucia comes into the room, and Vis looks up and he is like, I know good and well that is not Sedocia. That just, you guys. Anyways, also things that are going on at this time. Vis is moving up at the academy, getting into higher classes, and he has one class where all they do basically is run the labyrinth. The students, they're like paired up. One of them controls the device, and the other one tries to run the maze and avoid the traps and all of that. And so that's like a really big part of his classes at the academy at this point, of them trying to get the hang of the labyrinth and just like learn the layout and how to maneuver through it and like basically work as a team. Another big thing that happens is Vis sneaks out of the academy at one point to investigate the pre-cataclysm ruins that are on the island. And it's so creepy. That whole scene is just so unsettling. It feels like just a straight up horror moment. In the ruins, there's these symbols everywhere. There's these dead bodies everywhere that have been stabbed with these ebony blades. And this is where things really get creepy. The bodies all start like talking, and they start repeating the same phrase over and over and over again. And the phrase that they're repeating is, Obitium is lost, do not open the gate, synchronous is death. And at this point, we're still just like, what in the world is going on in this book? Another thing that happens is we see Vis and his classmates actually go back to his home island of Seuss. Of course, they don't know who he is. I really loved all of those chapters with Vis back on Seuss. You know, we get to see not only how much the Republic has imposed their will across the island, but also see some really strong signs of resistance, and know that some of the people there are still very loyal to Vis and his family, especially his father. And another big thing that happens is Vis rescues this Alupi, and Alupis are these kind of wolf-like creatures. He saves one and he names him after himself. He names the Alupi Diago. So now let's talk about the ending. I know that was a really brief, kind of broad overview of the big story moments. I barely scratched the surface. There is so much that happens in this book, you guys. But getting into the ending here, this is where I would say, again, like if you don't have time to go back and reread this entire book, and you still want a little bit more after this video, and you have the time, at least I would say read the last 100 pages again. I highly recommend starting with chapter 62. At this point, Vis has reached class 3 and he is finally eligible to take the Eudicium. And so chapter 62 is kind of the start of all of that. Not the Eudicium itself, it starts with Vis talking to Viridius, but he's starting to like prepare his resources, get things in line in order to take the Eudicium. I kind of think of it as like that final video game moment before you fight the big boss and the game is like, are you sure you did everything you want to do first? That's like chapter 62 for this book. So start there, and then it gets into the Eudicium, I think, in like the following chapter or so. So just quickly with the Eudicium, it is every bit as dangerous as all of the characters have said it is. And during this test, unfortunately, Vis's classmate Belly dies, and also very, very sadly, his best friend Calidus also dies during the Eudicium. But during this test, Vis finally runs the labyrinth again. This is what he's been training for from the very beginning with Lanistia, and then at the academy. He runs the labyrinth, and this time he finally makes it to the end of the labyrinth, and he makes it to like the area that's beyond the labyrinth. And then Vis wakes up, and when he wakes up, he has lost his arm, and he also remembers now that Calidus and Belly are dead. And because he was successful with the Eudicium, they ask Vis you know, what branch he wants to move into, and he decides to join the censor's office because Calidus was involved in some things and he was actually being blackmailed for the information that he knew. And so this feels like being in the censor's office will really give him access to the Republic's records and just allow him to do a little bit of digging. So he wants to do that. And so at that point, this is where we leave Vis's story and get into like the epilogue portion of this book. And so the big thing that happens at the end of The Will of the Many that just left everybody's jaw on the floor, including mine, is we learn that Vis was split into different versions of himself. And so now at the end of the book, we know that there are 3 copies of Vis. One copy of Vis exists in the world of Race, which is the world that we've been in this entire time. Our second copy of Vis wakes up in the world of Lucium, and then our third and final copy of Vis wakes up in the world of Obitium, and this is where he finally meets Ulquiscor's brother, C-Roar. So yeah, that was quite a bit of information, even for me to relay. That was just a lot going on. This book, both books actually are just a lot in the absolute best way possible. Again, this was just meant to kind of jog your memory, be a refresher for you, but also get you excited for the sequel, you guys. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, let me know down in the comments any questions you guys still have, anything that you want me to explain, expand on, anything about the world or the will, character story, whatever that you want me to dive a little bit deeper into. I would love to chat about it with you in the comments. Mark your calendars for November 11th for the release of I was making sure that I was actually holding the Strength of the Few. Mark your calendars for the Strength of the Few. My review of this book, my spoiler-free review, is going to go up on the release date. Yeah, on Tuesday, you guys are going to hear all of my thoughts on this book, all of the positives, and even some of my more nitpicky things about it. But overall, this is definitely one strong sequel, and I think such a worthy follow-up to The Will of the Many, which I keep telling you guys, I think is phenomenal. So yeah, that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I will see you in the next one. Until next time, I hope you guys take care.